Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. My name is Tony Anagor, I'm your host, and today we're talking to Mark Mirra. Mark is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Aligned, based out of New York. Their aim is to change the way we negotiate. Today we're going to be talking to Mark about his experience working at one of the largest negotiation companies in the space, and also about his dreams to end up in the White House, where he will be hopefully coaching and teaching some of our politicians on the best ways to negotiate with each other. This is going to be a wonderful conversation. Please join us on Empathy at the Table. Hello and welcome to another edition of Empathy at the Table. I'm your host, Tony Anagor, and today we have a special guest, Mark Mirra. I met Mark probably just around COVID, just before COVID, during COVID time. He came across my purview and I've been following him carefully, and he's set up an incredible company that's doing amazing things in the negotiation space. So it does give me great pleasure to welcome Mark Mirra to Empathy at the Table. Mark, welcome.
Thanks, Tony. Happy to be here.
Super. Mark, for our listeners who may not know who you are, could you just share a little bit about your interest in negotiation and what it is that you do?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Aligned, and we're on a mission to change the way the world perceives negotiation by making it easily understandable and approachable to everybody everywhere. And I have well over a decade of experience in the negotiation training and coaching space, and my passion for people development started even when I was super young, being a captain of a drum line, teaching people how the drums work, and then learning communication and conflict resolution through college and some future career opportunities as well. So here I am teaching the world something that I am really appreciative of, how people perceive conflict and how you can communicate it in a really exceptional and positive way.
Why is it, do you think, Mark, that the word conflict always comes in the same sentence as we mentioned negotiation? Conflict comes very quickly behind, or it's even preceding the word negotiation?
It's because if there wasn't a level of disagreement, conflict, there wouldn't be a reason to negotiate. You would just kind of throw stuff on a website or put it on a storefront, and people would just exchange a value of money or store of value, and you'd be on your way. Negotiation doesn't exist unless there's some level of disagreement on the terms. And disagreement is akin to conflict, but yet, as humans, we perceive conflict in a really negative way, where I want to rebrand conflict as something that can be healthy and that can be positive. Sometimes I call it creative friction, but without that friction, you're not going to be able to spark something new. So we kind of
Yeah,
want to rebrand what conflict looks like, and effectively, you need a little bit of conflict in order to have the basis for a negotiation.
a little bit of conflict. So I've seen some recent work of yours where you were talking about the difference between sales and negotiation, right? And sales is, look, yeah, I'm buying your product off Amazon and it's just a sale. The negotiation is where we disagree, as you said, on terms, where we have to actually get into some kind of contact with each other. Can you expand a little bit on that? Because a lot of listeners do tend to equate sales and negotiation. I hear that all the time, right? Yeah, they seem to go close together. Can you define how you specify the difference between the two?
Yes, and it's one of my favorite topics. When we look at sales and negotiation, we look at it on opposite ends of the same deal. The start of that deal is the sales process. The end of that deal is the negotiation process. I'll give you a really cool example.
Yeah.
So let's say it's Thursday when we're recording this. You're texting your buddies weekend plans. You want to go to the movies. One of your friends wants to go out to dinner. Another friend wants to go see a show. Right now, you're in the sales process. You're talking about how amazing the movies are. Maybe you want to go see Beetlejuice 2. I don't know. Your friend's talking about all these great restaurants in the area, and your other friend's saying, hey, this show is in town just for this weekend. We should jump all over it. That's the sales process. You're talking about features and benefits of the thing that you're interested in persuading and influencing others to do. Let's say Friday afternoon rolls around, and your buddies text back saying, you know what? Movies sound like a good idea. Let's go to the movies. At that point in time, sales process is done. I persuaded and influenced them to need or want, let's go to the movies. Now what we negotiate over is what movie will we see? What's the showtime going to be? Who's going to spend $197 on concessions at the concession stand? That then becomes your negotiation. We've agreed on the need. We want to go to the movies now. but not the terms. How are we going to get there? Who's going to drive and so on? That becomes then your negotiation. So they sit on opposite ends of the deal spectrum, and that's kind of how we view it.
Okay. So what happens if I want to go to the movies and you want to go to a restaurant? Do we begin the negotiation then? Or is
I
that,
would suggest
yeah,
that's your sales process.
that's
I
the
need to
sales process.
sell you on going to the movies because right now that Venn diagram of our interests just doesn't overlap unless we can widen the scope and say, why don't we go to an early dinner and then a late movie?
Yeah.
Then we've kind of blended both interests and we've
Right.
blended that into a negotiation now. But I still need to get buy-in that that person wants or desires to go to the movies. Because if they don't have any buy-in to go to the movies, they absolutely will not go. But then there's nothing to negotiate over.
So I was having this conversation, and this is another word that always slips into the discourse on negotiation. I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they said to me, "But negotiation sounds like manipulation to me." What's your response? Where do you shake out when the word manipulation comes into play?
There's a lot of words that are related to things that you do while negotiating. Manipulation's one of them, but it's usually immensely transactional. It views conflict in a very negative sense, and you're trying to manipulate people to see your sense of reality, and you may be using very misleading information to do that. I'm not going to suggest people don't negotiate that way. People absolutely negotiate that way. But in our opinion, it's a very small subset of negotiators that will negotiate in a manipulative way, and they usually view negotiation very transactionally.
Yeah.
So the world isn't all gumdrops and rainbows as much as we would love it to be. And we find you will get significantly better results by viewing things positively. But there are people that get some great results in the short term by manipulating others with
Yeah.
misleading information.
I think that's very open and very honest. Not don't deny that there are people who get great results by negotiating in very manipulative ways, and we've got many examples of that. And so but we don't advocate that,
Of
even
course.
though people do that. We need to. It's important that we accept that that's a reality. That there are people who do negotiate in these nefarious ways. So the question I actually, this was what I was going to kick off with, this question, because your whole ethos is to change the way the world views negotiation. What are you changing it from, and what are you changing it to?
People perceive negotiation using words like manipulative. They are trained to be cold and tough. They're trained to be hard bargainers and open extreme and demand value. And those are all tenets of little subsets of negotiation. But it ends up being the thing people think about when they think of negotiation. They think of this cold, tough, arrogant, dismissive individuals. And since humans, by nature, we tend to be conflict averse because we're pack animals. We like to be accepted by the pack. And there's tons and tons of research on how crippling loneliness can be, especially for younger males right now in the age of the internet. And if we can't appreciate how to have healthy conflict and healthy disagreement, people will just be fearful of negotiating because they liken the two the same way. They perceive conflict as something bad. Negotiation exists when conflict exists. I don't like conflict. I don't want to negotiate. And we want to change that. You can have very constructive and healthy relationships with people. And in fact, you're likely going to have way better relationships with people when you've been through some level of disagreement and you realize that I'm a human, you're a human, we both have interests. We may appreciate and value tons of interests that we have together, but we disagree on this small piece right here. So, how can we have that disagreement? How can we have that conversation? And I grew up um, looking at conflict in a really interesting way because both my parents got divorced when I was 4, but still ended up having an incredibly healthy relationship with each other to the point where my mom remarried, my dad remarried, but yet we can all have Thanksgiving together. And that is an
Awesome.
unbelievable, healthy look at conflict that I got when I was really young, which I realize an overwhelming majority of people don't have those types of good examples. So it's my job and it's our mission to change the way people look at conflict so you can be respectful and professional and positive and still be assertive and opinionated without being stubborn.
And so, What are some of the data points of information that you've picked up along the way? I know you've spent 10 years working in arguably one of the most well-known players in the space of negotiation. Maybe you can share a bit about your experience. I've seen how you went up the ranks. Maybe share that, and then give us some ideas of some absolute data points that you have that have led you to this conclusion.
So I'll take one small step back. I'll talk about during my time in college. So I went to school at the University of Maryland. In fact, I wanted to go to the business school. And I'm taking a bunch of business courses, doing really well. Then calculus hits me in the face. I fail my calculus course, and now I need to pivot to do something else. And what I found was I went down the communication route, which was an unbelievably perfect fit for me. I'm a great natural presenter. I tend to be very sociable, and I'm comfortable in conflict-rich environments. So during my track in communication, I take some courses in crisis management, conflict management, and negotiation. And wow, this is really interesting to me. And I didn't realize people viewed this in a highly negative way, where I'm viewing it in a really positive way. So I graduate from college, I have a couple sales roles, and I find an inside sales job at this negotiation consultancy. I'm like, this sounds super sexy. And in fact, it was paying the least amount of money of all the jobs I was looking at, but still living home. I'm feeling really comfortable. Let me take a flyer on it and see how I enjoy it. Within 3 weeks, I decided this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I ended up being there for 9 years. And I went through a lot of conflict there. Not to sugarcoat it, I loved my experience, but I went through a lot of conflict there. Started off inside sales and was told, you're too young to do any meetings yourself. So I needed to prove myself time and time and time again to show that I can hold intellectual conversations with people that may be twice my age in commercial experience. Then I was told, you'll never progress through the organization because you can never be a consultant. Straight to my face. So what did I do? I decided this is the job that I want. I'm going to go after it. So I recorded myself. I read lots of books. I challenged my thinking. And then I recorded myself to the point where I dropped a flash drive, yes, when we were still using flash drives, on the CEO of the Americas desk and said, just watch me. And they finally gave me an opportunity to be a consultant. And then I was told I couldn't manage people until I pushed the envelope to manage people. So I was always going through all of these different challenges throughout my time there. And what I found was if you're treating conflict in a healthy way, people will look at you and perceive you a little bit differently. I wasn't challenging because I wanted to be arrogant or narcissistic or selfish, which I'll take it on onus and say sometimes I was because I was really uncomfortable too, just like everybody else is. But I went through all those challenges and rose to the ranks to get to a position that was senior enough to see where those cracks were, but not empowered enough to fill them. And that really broke my heart because I thought I was going to be there for the next 10 years. But I realized that the individual that I was when I was hired was still the individual that they perceived me as that day. And I knew that was never going to change. So in all of my time and experience working there, I worked with tons of clients in different sectors. And I saw how they were negotiating as individuals and how what I was teaching them at that time was a very small slice of what negotiation is and was. And I realized I wanted to broaden that. So the second I left that company, I just worked somewhere else for a year before starting Aligned, I read everything. So I read all the books that I was told I didn't necessarily need to read because they had their own core philosophy. And I realized a couple key elements that is part of the Aligned backbone today. You can be nice to people. And in fact, if you're nice to people, you will likely net better medium and long-term results. But I will accept that short-term results can sometimes be gained when you're intimidating people. So that's a real data point that we've experienced where being nice and kind of being yourself and being personable will net you better medium and long-term results.
Sure.
Being clear in your expectations is another huge data point for us. Oftentimes people are ambiguous, they're vague, they're aloof, and they don't tell people exactly what they need because they feel like that information is going to be used against them. But the truth is, if you just tell people what you want and what you need, even if you're not making promises or commitments to it, you're much more likely to get that thing because they know what you want. And even if the other party gets the thing that they're desiring, if you got everything that you wanted anyway, why does it matter? So you're being nice, you're being clear, and you're also not viewing negotiation as a win-lose competition. And oftentimes that's drilled into people's heads too.
Mark, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but on the show, this whole idea of us being able to talk on the show like this is, I like being authentic, and but I always measure it with empathy. And so I'm going to say something that I hope you don't get offended by, but you come you I think you're probably about 20 years younger than me, or you look very young.
Ooh, okay.
And what I want to check with you is this amongst people of your generation, right? When you have these conversations, what's the overriding narrative when you talk about what it is that you do for a living and your views on negotiation?
Ooh, that's a good question. I just had so I meet a lot of people. Obviously, you meet a lot of people too, and there are different kind of subsets of individuals that will react to my business profession in different
Hmm.
ways.
Hmm.
The most, and I'm going to use this term a little liberally, annoying group of individuals when I tell them what I do instantly want to negotiate with me.
Right.
And they instantly want to test my knowledge and they instantly want to challenge me on all sorts of things. And for the most part, it's usually pretty lighthearted. But those subset of individuals that instantly want to negotiate, they instantly want to challenge, they instantly want to pressure you, are the same people that view negotiation as a conflict rich, transactional win lose environment. So I know right away when I'm interacting with those people, this is how they view
Right. Right.
negotiation as a lifestyle. The greater majority of individuals that I interact with run the gamut of different ways. So some people, let's say they have more commercial experience than me, or they've been in the game for a lot longer commercially. Um, they look at my experience and what we've been able to build at Aligned with a level of admiration because our ability to take really complex things and distill it down in a way that lets the masses kind of understand, I feel like that inspires them a bit.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a large subset of also individuals that feel scared of negotiating and they'd be a little bit vulnerable with me when I tell them what I do. Like, oh wow, that's so amazing. Like I could never do that. And by the end of the conversation that I have with them, I hope that I leave them with a sense of confidence that they can. And I think
Fantastic.
the biggest satisfaction that I get, like just going out and meeting people at a bar or friends and family, interacting with individuals that I haven't met yet. When they ask me what I do, I hope I can leave them with a sense of positivity that negotiation can be something that everybody can do. And you do it all the time,
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
you're looking at it in a highly negative way.
That's
So
why I'm
yeah,
really
there's a lot of
happy.
people.
I'm really glad that you're doing this because as I said, you do represent a generation that maybe see things slightly differently. And I think there's an opportunity for people like you to kind of speak up with the confidence that you have, with the way in which you see things. I mean, you've got 10 years experience in, as I said, one of the largest companies in the space. And going into actually teach negotiation, it's not something that people go to university to learn how to become a negotiation teacher, right? It's built based on your experience and a deep passion that you have. And I noticed this about you. There was, I don't know whether you're going to be comfortable sharing this, but I was so impressed when you told me the goals for Aligned. And you literally had them
Mm.
spelt out, like for the next 3 years. The next, would you be open to share that with the
Yeah,
listeners? Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. So we're kind of on this 10-year journey right now. Started the company Jan 1, 2023, and our goal was within 4 to 5 years to be the number one negotiation training and consulting firm. Period. End of story. That doesn't necessarily mean we are the largest from a headcount standpoint, but when people think of negotiation, they think of getting aligned. That's our first goal. Our second goal was within 7 or 8 years to be the number one niche consultancy of any discipline, irrelevant if it's negotiation or communication or tax, doesn't matter. When they think of training and they think of consulting, they think of aligned. And within 10 years, we're the individuals invited into the White House
That's the
because we're going to
one.
help, yeah, we're going to help the individuals that are setting the foundation for each company, each country rather, communicate in a little more empathy, a little more understanding. I don't know, maybe zooming out a little bit and seeing the big picture instead of always seeing every 2, 4, or 6 year cycle when they need to
Yeah.
get reelected. That's our mission. Our mission is to fundamentally change the world. And I know that's a really lofty goal, but if you don't have lofty goals like that, you don't have milestones to go
Yeah,
after. And that is what we
absolutely.
were trying to do.
Yeah, and I love it. I love the boldness of the dream, and you're working towards it because you contacted me at the very beginning before you set up the company, and you were showing just like an interest in going off on your own and doing something. And I've watched you carefully. Tell us now. You started with zero, just like it was you, an idea in your head, and tell us now a little bit about how the company's evolved and what you're doing at the moment.
Yeah. So we are evolving into a full scope of services for negotiation. We started off with effectively a couple workshops, and we knew that we needed to start with a couple workshops and at least one anchor client. Fast forward almost 2 years, we have 15 plus clients. We have a full suite of solutions from an unbelievable 90-minute video series shot with exceptional 4K audio equipment, same stuff that the company Masterclass uses,
Mm-hmm.
through fundamentals, intermediate, advanced plus level work. We relaunched a personality assessment called your silhouette, which blends how you view conflict and how you view your professional personality with your preferences of negotiation style. So it gives you an unbelievable understanding of who you are and what you do. And we just wrapped up an amazing keynote for Berkshire Hathaway and 50 plus of their companies. To be invited into that as an organization as young as we are years ahead of where I thought we would be, which is amazing. We're hiring new talent, and that new talent is coming in. Accelerate. Thank you. Hey, I like that. We're hiring in new talent that is pushing the envelope on an innovation standpoint. Every single quarter, we're releasing new content, new specialties, and new ways that really surprise and delight our clients, because that's really our methodology is how do we surprise and delight by helping their teams negotiate with a lot more confidence and a lot more assertiveness without being an ass.
Yeah. How do you think that moving forward that you're going to be able to keep a focus on actually making a difference, changing the world, changing the way we negotiate, and scaling up your business?
Talent is the most important thing we have. So it takes us a really long time to find and attract talent. So anyone out there that's listening to this, reach out to me. Introduce yourself if you're interested in negotiation, but more importantly, if you're interested in people development, communication, challenging yourself and challenging others. Yeah, the topic we talk about is negotiation at the end of the day, but it's broader than that. It's communication, it's interaction, and again, it's people development. So if you're interested in any of those things, reach out and introduce yourself. We're always looking for exceptional talent, and we want to hire
Awesome.
talent that teaches us what to do instead of hiring talent that we teach what to do
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily. It has to be that symbiotic relationship. But that is unquestionably the hardest thing that we have. We feel very confident in our brand. We feel very confident in our methodology. We just want to be able to find the right mix of individuals that can take this methodology, take these frameworks, and take this brand, take it on board the mission that we want to be able to provide the world and the service that we want to be able to provide, and do that at scale. That is without question the hardest thing that we have to do is attract the best talent.
yeah, yeah. You and 1,000 other companies, right?
Yeah, I know.
And
But you know what, though? It's important, though, that we push the envelope on talent. Some organizations will hire you to run their playbook. And yeah, to a degree, that is what we would do. But we want to hire talent that challenges us because we have just a culture where all the boats rise. And
hmm,
if someone is sprinting ahead, it's on that person to pull the rest of the group with them and to challenge each other. I just have a text conversation with our partner and my co-founder just this morning about Oprah quotes: "Surround yourself with people who lift each other up higher." Or another quote that we just got dropped in this chat box was, "You always win. You surround yourself with good people." Like that's the culture that we have. Find the best combination of high performing individuals that are ready to smash through any barrier in front of them and follow this mission until the end.
hmm. You distilled thousands of negotiations into four specific areas.
Yeah.
You had them hard bargaining, partnership, concession, and value creating.
Yep.
I like that. I like the simplicity, but the nuanced complexity of that concept. Could you share that with us?
Yeah, so let's zoom out again, because I'm a big zoom out kind of person. If I can't get you to remember what it is you're supposed to do, then you're not going to do it anyway. So it's not about there are 8 different types of negotiation or 12 different strategies or 16 different conflict modes, you're just not going to remember it.
Hmm.
But if I can tell you on the most transactional end of the spectrum, you hard bargain. On the most collaborative end of the spectrum, you're in partnership. And in between, you're either concession trading, a little more distributive, or value creation, obviously a little more collaborative. I can get you to remember that. And I can also get you to remember when you're hard bargaining, you got to adopt the mindset of a hunter because you're extracting value. And when you're in partnership, you got to adopt the mindset of a deal maker because shaking hands and kissing babies is kind of important too.
Hmm.
Because it's about internal alignment and judging multiple different stakeholders and multi party issues. I can get you to remember those 4 things. In the same way, if I can get you to remember the process to follow, where you prepare, you communicate, you propose, and you align. If I can get you to remember those effectively, those 2 key concepts, I'm 80% of the way there. And then
Hmm.
everything else we have, the handouts, the tools, the videos, the workshops, give you the breadth and depth to be successful at it. But it starts with, can I remember what I'm supposed to do?
I like it. What would you say in if somebody was to ask you, you meet somebody at a cocktail dinner and you've literally got a minute to say, and they say, hey Mark, what's the secret sauce to negotiation? How would you respond to that?
Be clear with what you want and need, and don't be afraid to say it. Simple.
Let me make this a note. Repeat that for us.
Be clear on what you want, and don't be afraid to say it. I feel like a lot of the times, and this goes back to the first thing that we said on this
Mm,
talk, is people view negotiation as manipulative, and they're scared to share their interests and their needs. I'm never scared to say that. That doesn't mean I always get what I want, but the other party is always clear on what I want, and I'm always clear on being open-minded on the options it would take for me to get the thing that I want. I'll give you a perfect example. Some clients will come to us and they want to negotiate with a negotiation training company. I love that. I love when they want to negotiate with us because I'll tell them directly. Like, oh, they'll say, oh, well, we need a big discount. My answer is always, sure, absolutely. Happy to give you a big discount. These are all the things you need to do for us to unlock that discount for you. And now it's their choice. They can
mm,
say, yep, I can do those things. And if they say, yep, I can do those things, then I'm super happy. They're happy, everyone's happy. If they say no, well, then I can credibly say, well, then I can't give you that discount. So if you lower the discount that you're expecting and you raise up some of these things that I need on my end, we can meet in some sort of value creation and or concession trading type dynamic to get this deal over the line.
yeah.
So don't be afraid to say what you want. Be clear on what your needs are. And I guess the last piece is just say it in a positive way. Recognize that you don't want to intimidate your counterparty. Let's say you're managing up and you're trying to deal with your boss. The last thing you want to do is talk down to your boss, especially if they're more insecure in their position. The first thing they're going to do is cut you at the knees.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how can you meet eye to eye with someone and not be intimidating? That's another big piece too.
I just love this conversation, Mark. I just wish more and more people could think like this and see that there is another way. And so why do you think it is? Why do you think that this old way, or this, let me not call it old, the traditional way of negotiation, why do you think that still exists and it's still the prevailing narrative of how we negotiate with each other?
Think about humans as a species, all right? Tens of thousands and thousands and thousands of years we've been around. But our negotiations have been largely not that complicated. We need food, we need protection. That's more or less all we needed.
Hmm.
So all of our negotiations didn't start getting complex, like really, really complex, for the last couple hundred years, where we had way more terms, we had globalization, we had commercialization. Maybe like the last 500, 600 years, our negotiations started getting complex. However, even as of the last 150 to 200 years, the solution was usually, I'm bigger and tougher than you, so I'm just going to roll you over.
Yeah.
So while we had complexity to some of our needs, our solutions were usually, well, if you don't like what you have, I'm just going to send the Navy, or I'm just going to send this battalion in and we'll take over your town, and it's irrelevant. Only now are we trying to realize we can resolve conflicts commercially and not through military force, although that still happens way too much. That means the legacy thinking on how to resolve conflicts effectively with a hammer is still prevalent. And you also have a society, take it from the US, as well, actually, many countries, male dominated, usually white male dominated, or at least one socioeconomic class dominated. Those individuals haven't had to negotiate with many different styles because they had a style that was very successful for them in the short and medium term, which was much more transactional, much more aggressive.
Yeah.
Now you're realizing those styles do not work for the long term. You'll always ever be chasing your tail. And
Mm.
that's where you're getting more sophisticated negotiators come to the forefront that are looking at life much more zoomed out with much more complexity, much more richness, and much more empathy. And eventually, and I'm 35, you're going to have this millennial group of individuals start to move into all of those executive roles and move out some of that legacy thinking where it was much more transactional and much more short-term focus. But it's still
Yeah.
going to take time. And it takes more people talking about this
Sure.
and talking about negotiation, what it could be instead of what it was.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We are equipped for highly successfully equipped for a life that we lived maybe 50, 100 years ago, as opposed to where we are now. Once again, I mean, I'm so encouraged to have these conversations with people who are in various walks of life. And I wanted to ask you as well, based on that, is what do you think? Where do you think you can get the biggest bang for your buck in the political world or in the business world?
For me as an individual or just for all sorts of
No,
people?
no. I'm talking. Let's say you, as teaching negotiation,
Yeah.
right, and you had to commit your life to working within the business world or working in politics, and coming with your message of empathy and collaboration, that type of style of negotiation. Where do you think you could make the most impact?
In my opinion, I think spending the next 10 years in the commercial world would allow me to spend the rest of my life in the political realm. Because if these practices and teachings work commercially, they can work in the political sphere. But the important piece is you need to understand there are interest-based negotiations and there are rights-based negotiations. Commercially, we focus on a lot of interests, price, volume, delivery time, etc. The political sphere focuses on rights. It's my right to an abortion. It's my right to carry a gun whenever I want. It's my right to universal health care. You can't trade rights.
Hmm.
So if I can make a huge impact and we at Align can make a huge impact in the commercial world and show them that you can negotiate with assertiveness and empathy, we can then translate those teachings into the political realm as well and get them to move away from rights toward interests because you can trade interests. You cannot trade rights. It's too
But
binary.
then it also, after rights, it kind of bumps up to power, right? So it's
Mm.
who has the rights. And then at the end of the day, if we can't agree on rights, then, well, I'm more powerful than you anyway, right? So there's another level up. And then when you get to that point where you use your power in a or any conflict situation, then at the very end, you end up negotiating anyway, right? And so I guess what you're saying is instead of having it escalate to that level, let's use a different approach to actually kind of talk about it here. So it doesn't need to escalate into, whose muscles are bigger than mine. But also, I'm a big fan of MMA. I'm a big
Mm.
fan I like people like, I do like Dana White. I do like Joe Rogan. I do like the alpha males, right? I like David Goggins. I like competing. But I also know how to channel that energy in the right way, right? And this is learnt behavior. What do you do when you come across people who maybe choose to focus that level of competition, adrenaline, alpha dominance in the wrong way?
This is a great topic. I'm big Goggins guy. So when I left the old firm I was at, the first thing I did was read "You Can't Hurt Me."
Yeah, right.
Love that book. Big Goggins guy. He is a maniac,
Yeah,
but an unbelievable case study on mind over matter. Right?
yeah,
So many
absolutely.
instances of his mind just like blasting through what his body couldn't do at the time.
Yeah.
Love that. So all this like alpha male type discussions, I'm not saying individuals shouldn't be competitive, sometimes abrasive, aggressive, and really go after it. I'm an incredibly driven individual. And sometimes there can be those moments where that empathy dulls the knife a little bit, I gotta say, because you're not going in for the kill. What I will say to some of these individuals that really lead in with that alpha male mindset is that's for you. Your mindset is to blast through walls all the time. But there's too many, and you see them all over social media, that will say that alpha male mindset comes when you sacrifice other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And what they're saying is you need to not tolerate this type of thinking, or not tolerate this type of individual, or not tolerate this type of lifestyle. That alpha male mentality is for you and you alone. It's not for someone else. So I really, really hate, and I don't like using that word all that much, but hate when that mindset tries to convince others that that is the only mindset you should have. You should have a spouse that just stays home, cooks and cleans, and
Mm.
rears children. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not for everybody. That's just the choice that you want to make for yourself. So yes, be super competitive. Be aggressive in your approach to value for your life. Have your lifestyle that you want to have, but it doesn't need to come at the sacrifice of other lifestyles too. Those
Yeah.
are their choices that they choose to make for themselves. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mark Mirra, what a wonderful conversation. Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our conversation today, but I'd like to ask you, what is it that right now that's that you're really passionate about, that you're really like a specific project that you might need help with, and how can anybody who's listening who might be inspired by you, how can they contact you?
Yeah, we're expanding our business. So the biggest, most important thing for us is to attract the best possible talent that we can find that helps us continue this narrative. So I encourage people reach out to Aligned, engage with us, challenge us, look for opportunities to work with us, whether it be speaking engagements, presentations, or collaborations and partnerships. Our biggest thing is trying to get the word out on why and how negotiation can be a little bit different. You can reach out to us over LinkedIn, Aligned Negotiation. You can reach out to myself directly on LinkedIn. You can check out our website, alignednegotiation.com, and there's tons of resources, blogs, videos, handouts, courses that you can take to learn more about what negotiation is. So my biggest call out to everybody here, view negotiation a little bit differently. Try to look at the positive ends of finding a deal and agreeing on the terms instead of the negative end, which is the discomfort, the anxiety, and the nervousness. If you're a little bit anxious, you're alive. If you're nervous, you're paying attention. Just live with
Lovely.
it.
Mark Mirra, thank you for joining us on Empathy at the Table. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.